In Venezuela, the second day of the International Summit Against Fascism as part of the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the 2002 coup d'etat is in progress. Russian President Vladimir Putin assured that the objectives and tasks of the operation in Ukraine will be achieved and that it was impossible to avoid a confrontation with the anti-Russian forces in that country. At least 45 people have died in floods and mudslides after rainstorms struck the South African port city of Durban and surrounding KwaZulu-Natal province. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Dio Martin. From the TeleSUR studios in Havana, we begin with the news. In Venezuela, the second day of the International Summit Against Fascism as part of the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the 2002 coup d'etat is in progress. The summit began on Monday, April 11th, with the participation of at least 200 guests from 5 continents. Participants will discuss current methods to plan a coup, as well as the reaction of the Venezuelan people, which led to the return to power of Commander Hugo Chavez after the rupture of the constitution in April 2002. They will also share their opinions on other topics, such as new forms of communication, the importance of traditional political models, the adaptation of the world to new technologies, and finally, they will share their struggle and popular resistance experience for the new times. There are new developments in the case of the military operation in Putumayo, southwest Colombia. In a recent investigation carried out by an alliance of national media outlets in the place where 11 people were killed, new information proved the existence of a violation of humanitarian law. The operation that took place on March 28th in the community of Puerto Leguizamo left serious questions for the human rights experts consulted in the investigation. The presence of unarmed civilians participating in a bazaar to raise funds to improve conditions in the area, the presence of army officers without the required uniforms, and the irregularities committed in the removal of the bodies are some of the circumstances exposed by these investigations. The testimonies and the evidence gathered questioned the legitimacy of the operation, where among other things that the civilians killed and injured were labeled as guerrilla fighters without any basis whatsoever.
The surrogate mother who was with me told me. She showed me some videos that have been published that we have been posed as guerrilla, that the 4 wounded were guerrillas, and we were detained. Vanessa, are you a guerrilla member? No, I'm not a guerrilla fighter, and I do not belong to any legal armed group. It makes you angry to be called a guerrilla when you know that you are not one.
Brazil's Supreme Electoral Court has invited the European Union to observe the presidential elections scheduled to take place on October 2nd. The president of the higher electoral court, Edson Fachin, has considered the integration of the foreign community in the upcoming vote as fundamental. According to the site, the Brazilian electoral system was subject to constant attacks by President Jair Bolsonaro and his allies without any evidence, and have accused the system of fraud and weaknesses in the electronic ballot box. The United Nations Special Envoy on the Right to Freedom of Peaceful Assembly and Association, Clement Nielet Vule, warned that last week that political violence destroys democracy in Brazil and called for measures to ensure a safe environment during voting. Argentina formalized its membership to the Belt and Road Initiative, China's flagship global infrastructure development program, which seeks to build trade and new political and economic ties with participating nations. The publication in the official Gazette of the Latin American nation confirmed the membership. After signing a memorandum of understanding at a meeting in Beijing on February 8th, Argentina became the 21st country from Latin America and the Caribbean to join the international initiative, which launched in 2013 and first extended into the region in 2017. It is also the largest Latin American economy to join so far, with the accession of other major economies in the region such as Brazil and Mexico still pending. The initiative promotes exchanges of goods, technology, capital, and personnel through connectivity and mutual learning. It also prioritizes the use of national currencies in investment and trade, as well as the signing of cooperation agreements in education, culture, health, tourism, and sports. Ecuador's Constitutional Court will address on Tuesday in an extraordinary session the president's partial veto of the law on abortion for sexual abuse issued by the National Assembly. This decision was made by a majority of 75 votes in the plenary session of the legislature because last April 5th, the governing body established 12 weeks for women over 18 years of age in urban areas and up to 18 on an exceptional basis in the case of girls, adolescents, and women from rural localities and indigenous communities. However, the executive considered that the term limit should be 12 weeks without distinction and established prerequisites for the termination of pregnancy. We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi, and welcome back to From the South. President Vladimir Putin of Russia assured that the objectives and tasks of the operation in Ukraine will be achieved and that it was impossible to avoid a confrontation with the anti-Russian forces in that country. During his speech at the Votochny Cosmodrome, he said that the objectives are to help the people in the Donbass region. The Russian president, together with the Belarusian president Alexander Lukashenko, celebrated together the Day of Cosmonautics. There he stated that Kiev's authorities, supported by the West, refused to comply with the Minsk agreements, which were intended to resolve the situation in the Donbass. He added that it was impossible to continue putting up with genocide and emphasized that the Russian troops are fighting with weapons that have no equal in the world. Finally, Putin concluded that it is impossible to isolate a country of Russia's size. The presidents of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, met on Tuesday in the Vostochny in the Russian Far East to commemorate Cosmonautics Day and review bilateral agendas. As confirmed by Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov, the two leaders will tour the space launch facility and may discuss issues of future development in what Russia recognizes as one of its largest economic and high-tech projects. The leaders will also discuss the situation around Ukraine and issues on the bilateral agenda. Russia celebrates Cosmonautics Day every April 12th in honor of the first manned flight out of the Earth's atmosphere by Yuri Gagarin in the Vostok 1 spacecraft. In the last 2 years, Russia has completed more than 50 space launches.
Today, in the new conditions, we are talking about continuing the cooperation on the groundwork that was made in previous decades, but passed on today's developments. I mean the creation of a new satellite for high-precision Earth sensing, the creation of joint work and plasma engines in the future that can be used. This is a very promising topic, and of course, the construction of the Cosmodrome itself. We need good, competent builders. You know, it's important that I came here and don't feel sanctions here. You walk around and don't feel the sanctions. Everything is domestic. People are working. Thousands of people are working at the facility. Thank you for inviting us to participate in this construction. We will definitely accept your proposal and offer your interesting options.
Russia destroyed 3 Ukrainian tanks and several infantry combat vehicles and confirmed the neutralization of at least 50 soldiers. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that the remaining Ukrainian troops in Mariupol are surrounded in the territory of the Ilyich power plant. The Defense Ministry's brief assured that Kiev's forces tried to run away in armored vehicles, but that the Russian troops stopped them. The battle left several machines destroyed and Ukrainian military casualties. According to Moscow's report, during the night, high-precision missiles launched by air and sea also destroyed an ammo depot and a plane hangar from the nationalist forces in the Staro-Konstantinov military airfield. Likewise, Moscow's officials confirmed the annihilation of other 32 Ukrainian targets. On Tuesday, the Japanese government approved additional sanctions against 398 people and 28 organizations from Russia in connection with the situation around Ukraine. According to the website of the Japanese Foreign Ministry, deputies of the State Duma fell under these sanctions. The Japanese government has also approved a ban on new investments in Russia and will freeze assets of Sberbank and Alfa Bank starting May 12th. New investments from Japan to Russia from May 12th can be made only with special permits. The cabinet also agreed to an import ban on 38 items, including vodka and other liquors, electric machinery, and lumber, effective on April 19th. The United States government warns that the inflation data to be released on Tuesday will be extraordinarily high. Once more, the responsibility lies outside the Biden administration. This time, the Kremlin is to blame. Despite the fact that the numbers have been soaring since November 2021, when the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, exceeded 7.5%, and that in February maintained the trend, Washington has blamed Russia for this. Forgetting that President Joe Biden assured that the measures imposed against the Eurasian nation would not affect them because they had taken the necessary precautions, experts assure that the Biden's Democratic government is visibly nervous regarding the electoral cost that the historic price increase could have in November's legislative elections. The White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki has gone a step further and has directly held the president of another country, Vladimir Putin, responsible for the situation.
We expect March CPI headline inflation to be extraordinarily elevated due to Putin's price hike. And we expect a large difference between core and headline inflation, reflecting the global disruptions in energy and food markets.
For all the success of the United States-led campaign to isolate Russia on the world stage, India stood out as one major democracy that has been reluctant to criticize Vladimir Putin and that is unlikely to change anytime soon. During an hour-long video call between U.S. President Joe Biden, senior officials, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the leaders expressed a growing alarm over the destruction caused in the framework of the conflict in Ukraine. India's neutral stance in the conflict has raised concerns in Washington and earned praise from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who lauded India for judging the situation in its entirety, not just in a one-sided way. While the meeting was described by U.S. officials as warm and candid, U.S. head of state urged Indian Prime Minister to not accelerate the purchase of Russian oil as several Western allies look to cut off Moscow's energy income. The Organization of Oil Exporting Countries, OPEC+, warned the European Union that the sanctions imposed against Russia, current and future, could give way to one of the worst oil supply crises in history. This Monday, representatives of the European Union met in Vienna with representatives of the world's largest oil alliance to negotiate an increase in production to compensate for the Russian deficit. They also requested sanctions against Moscow. Some representatives of the European Union insinuated that OPEC could have some responsibility in the crisis. OPEC Secretary General Mohammed Barkindo rejected such an allegation, saying that more than 7 million barrels of Russian oil per day could be lost, as well as other exports. Barkindo said that it would be almost impossible to compensate for a loss of such high volumes. OPEC rejected the request made by the United States and the International Energy Agency to increase dumping of crude oil in order to bring prices down. We have more news coming up after one final short break. Please stay with us. Hi, and welcome back. At least 45 people died in floods and mudslides after rainstorms struck the South African port city of Durban and surrounding KwaZulu-Natal province. The province's Department of Cooperative Governance announced in a statement that the death toll could possibly increase as more reports come in. Days of pounding rain flooded several areas and shut dozens of roads across the southeastern city, while landslips caused train services across KwaZulu-Natal to be suspended. The Disaster Management Department in KwaZulu-Natal province urged people to stay at home and ordered those residing in low-lying areas to move to higher ground. According to Provincial Premier Isile Zikala, more than 2,000 houses and 4,000 informal homes have been a way to evacuate people trapped in affected areas. Heavy rains caused by a summer tropical depression killed at least 25 people in the central and southern Philippines, mostly due to landslides. City Police Chief Joe Mancolado said 22 villagers died in landslides in 4 villages in Baybay City in central Leyte province on Sunday and Monday. 3 other storm-related deaths were reported by the government's main disaster response agency in the southern provinces of Davao de Oro and Davao Oriental. Officials said nearly 200 floods were reported in different areas in central and southern provinces over the weekend, displacing about 30,000 families, some of which were moved to emergency shelters. At least 20 storms and typhoons batter the Philippines each year, mostly during the rainy season that begins around June. A dust storm that has swept through much of Iraq has left dozens of people in hospitals with respiratory problems, a health ministry spokesman confirmed on Tuesday. The storm erupted in the north of the country on Thursday, prompting the cancellation of flights serving Erbil, capital of the autonomous Kurdistan region. As the storm swept south, it shrouded Baghdad and cities as far as south as Nasiriyah in a ghostly orange, and the capital buildings and vehicles were covered in ochre-colored dust. The director of Iraq's meteorological office said that while dust storms were not uncommon in the country, they are becoming more frequent due to drought, desertification, and declining rainfall. Iraq is particularly vulnerable to climate change, having already witnessed record low rainfall and high temperatures in recent years. Pakistan's new Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is taking steps to revive the country's economy. On his first day in office, the Pakistani premier abolished 2 days off per week in government offices and also modified working hours in a bid to strengthen the national economy. Sharif was elected by Parliament as Prime Minister on Monday to replace Imran Khan, who was ousted after facing a no-confidence motion. Sharif is expected to remain in office until 2023, when general elections are scheduled. Protesters marched and chanted anti-government slogans in the streets of Colombo on Tuesday, on the same day that Sri Lanka said it is suspending its repayment of foreign debt. Sri Lanka is halting debt payment, including bonds and government-to-government borrowings, pending the completion of a loan restructuring program with the International Monetary Fund to deal with the island nation's worst economic crisis in decades. Sri Lankans for the past months have been enduring shortages of fuel, food, and other essentials, and daily power outages. Most of those items are paid for in hard currency, but Sri Lanka is on the brink of bankruptcy, saddled with dwindling foreign reserves and $25 billion in foreign debt. Much of the anger expressed in weeks of protests has been directed at the Rajapaksa family, including the president and prime minister, who have been in power for most of the past 2 decades.
We've been depending on them for too long. It's been 74 years, right, ever since the British left us. And look where we are right now. Today we declare that we are defaulting our bank for in debt. So we have got to the rock bottom. We are going to restructure our entire loan scheme. So that means there is no other place we could fall here up. We have got to the rock bottom. So why, like, this is the perfect opportunity to reset everything, like reset Sri Lanka, to start rebuilding.
Peru began the latest stage of its COVID-19 vaccination campaign, offering a second booster dose, the fourth in entirety, to its health workers. The aim is to reduce the risk of infection for medical professionals, since their work puts them in direct contact with patients. According to the executive director of immunizations of the Peruvian Ministry of Health, Maria Martinez, the fourth dose will also be for those who are over the age of 70 or have weakened immune systems. The latest round of vaccinations at centers around the Lima metropolitan area will continue until April 13th. Peru has had more than 3.5 million cases of coronavirus infections, with more than 200,000 deaths related to COVID-19, according to Johns Hopkins University's tally of cases worldwide.
I thank the Ministry of Health for today, for having the 4 doses applied to health personnel, especially to the doctors. I received the 4th dose a few minutes ago without any problems. I'm very happy for it and very grateful to God for this blessing.
I think it is very good that there is a 4th dose to protect us at this level of the pandemic. This helps us a lot to strengthen our immune system and also protect us from any disease, especially COVID-19.
We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Martin. Thank you for watching.